Okie dokie. So now you can see here that we have beautiful looking fire and smoke. And let's go ahead and come over here to our render engine settings and change from EV to cycles just to make our life a little bit easier. I'm going to turn on my GPU there. And I'm just going to come down here to color management and take the view transform and change it from filmic to standard. Next I'm going to take my render samples and I'm going to bring that down to 32 just for the time being. I'm going to take the light paths and I'm going to take the total down to 1, the diffuse to 1, the glossy to 1, transparency, transmission, and actually volume. I'm going to bring that from 0 up to 1. Actually, I don't need any volume. We can just leave all that at 1 for now. The other thing I'm going to do is here in the Film tab, I'm going to turn on Transparent. And then I actually need to go ahead in the World tab where it says Color. I'm going to add in an environment texture. And just open up an environment texture. I'm just going to grab something that's sunny and blue sky because that's close to what we had on that day. So now if I go into the rendered view, you can see what we are getting. We're getting what looks to be some pretty great fire. So now I'm just going to close all these other ones down. Let's just close down. And I'm going to change this sculpting one into a compositing one, compositing tab. And then I'm going to go ahead and right click and do a horizontal split. And then I'm going to split that bottom one as well horizontally. So I have 3 horizontal windows. This top one I'm going to change to a image editor, and then I'm going to select the viewer node. This middle one I'm going to select the compositor, and I'm going to turn on use nodes. And then this bottom one I'm going to select the timeline. And what I want to do is just make sure that I'm somewhere in the middle here, so somewhere where the fire is definitely going to be there. Now let's go back into let's go back over to our properties panel and go to the view layer settings. Actually, before we do that, let me go ahead and add in one more collection. And this top collection, I'm going to call this smoke. And this bottom collection, I'm going to call this hide. So I'm actually going to take this tracker and put it in the hide view layer. Actually, what I need to do is open up all of these and select all of this and then go to hide. There you go. And now if I turn on the restriction toggles, I can actually turn this hide layer to indirect only, and that will hide our icosphere from the camera. Okay, back to our passes. Let's just go ahead and scroll down here. We need an emission pass right there. And since we're here, we might as well turn on a denoising data pass. And then here in our compositor, let's go ahead and hit Shift A and bring in a denoise node. And let's go ahead and grab the noisy image and stick that in the image, denoising normal and denoising albedo, and then put that into the composite. Now I'm going to go ahead and set up some different stuff here before we really get into the compositing. I'm going to hit Shift A and add in a reroute node. I'm going to come up here to edit and preferences and make sure that node wrangler is turned on, and it's not, so turn that on. And then I'm going to Control Shift left click in order to bring the viewer in. And then I'm going to select all of these and hit Shift A and search for a frame node. Just kind of frame everything. Then grab all of these nodes, hit G, and just put that inside of the frame. Okay, next I'm going to bring in another frame node, and I'm going to cover over these nodes here, grab them both, hit G, and then click in order to put them in the frame. This one, let me change the color to something a little bit different, and change the label to fire. This one I'll change the label to render nodes. It's just good to stay organized. Okay, last but not least, let's hit Shift A and search for image and bring in an image node. And then let's open up our footage. Just grab that first frame and click OK. And then in the frames input here, let's go ahead and put 180 and then hit Shift A, add in one more frame, and just grab that and stick that there. And then this one, let's change the color and call this background. Alright, now we are ready to go. So let's just go ahead and hit Shift A and add in an alpha over node. And I'm going to drop that in between my render here and the rendered nodes. And then I'm going to grab my backdrop and stick that into the top socket. And my render there is in the bottom socket. And you can see nothing has happened. And that's because we actually need to render out one frame before we can see what we're doing. So let's go ahead and hit F12 and watch what happens. And you can see nothing is happening here, and that's because I forgot one important thing, and that is that we need a light in the scene. So I'm going to go back to my layout tab. I'm going to come here, hit 3 on my keyboard, and hit Shift A and add in a light, a sun lamp, and then I'm just going to kind of rotate it so that it's coming from the back, just like the light in my scene. And that should be about good. Since it's fire, it doesn't need to be super perfect. Let's go ahead and hit F12 one more time. And you can see we've already got fire going on here. But there's a few things that we can do to make this look just a little bit better. Let's go ahead and do that. The first thing that we can do, we can kind of fix some of these edges here. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a color ramp. Shift A, ramp. And add that here. Oops. Wrong spot. And I'm going to take the emission from the emission output and stick that into the color ramp here. So if I Control Shift left click, we can see that we have an alpha going on. Next, I'm going to add in a blur node, and I'm going to blur this by 25 pixels. And then finally, I'm going to Shift A and add in a dilate erode node, and I'm actually going to move these over a little bit here, give some more space, and then I'm going to Shift D and I'm actually going to duplicate that, so I have 2 dilate and erode nodes. The first one I'm going to change to feather, and the second one I'm going to change to distance. And then I'm going to set the feather dilate erode to -20 and the distance dilate erode to -36. Let me go ahead and bring this back to something like -5. Bring the dilate one back to maybe a -2. And then we're going to take this output here and go ahead and stick it into the factor of the alpha over, and then Control Shift click on that reroute node to show us our fire again. And let me just bring this bring that in there so we're not getting confused. Now let me go ahead and just pull the white back on the color ramp, and you can see that brings some of the yellow back in, makes that look a little bit more like fire. Let's go ahead and Shift A and search for a color balance node and put that between our denoise node and our alpha over, and then hit Shift A and find a color correction node as well and stick that between your denoise and your color balance. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and do some color correction here on the render. I'm going to take some of these shadows here in the lift section, and I'm just going to change that over to being a little bit red. And then for the gamma, let's just go ahead and lift that up a little bit into the blue. And now for the highlights, of course most of this is highlights, so let's go ahead and bring that down to something like a deeper red. Then I'm just going to add in a little bit of saturation using the color correction node. I'm going to add 1.05, saturate it just a teensy tiny bit, and then for the gain I'm going to bring that up to 1.5. There we go. Now we have a lovely looking fireball. Now we can just select an output. So I'm going to come over here to the output settings and I'll just select my desktop. For the file format, I'm just going to say an FFmpeg because this is going to be a real quick render, and I'll just change the encoding to an H.264 in an MP4, and then for the quality I'll change it to high, and I'm just going to render this out and I'll come back once it is done. Okie dokie, well here's the final render. So Blender went ahead and rendered out the fire and then composited the fire over the footage and then exported that as a video file. So now I can just go ahead and hit play, and you know, it's not 100% perfect, but it's not terrible at the same time. You can see over here our domain kind of gets in the way of the fire, kind of pushes up against it, but it's not too noticeable. So anyway, I hope that this has been helpful to you guys, and I hope that you can use this technique to make some cool VFX of your own. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're all staying safe out there, and I will see you next time.